For December 14th, 2011 of the Edina Planning Commission. Jackie, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Scheer. Here. Commissioner Forrest. Here. Commissioner Potts.
Here.
Commissioner Platter.
Here.
Commissioner Kurkowski.
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Here.
Commissioner Staunton.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Chair Grable.
Here. Thank you. First item of business is the approval of the agenda. You've already received the agenda. Are there any changes or suggestions for tonight's agenda? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second? All in favor say aye. Aye. The agenda is approved. Next item, approval of the consent agenda. The first item there is the approval of the minutes of the November 9, 2011 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any comments or corrections concerning the minutes from November 9? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The minutes are approved. The next item of business on the agenda is community comment. During community comment, residents, citizens are invited to share new issues or concerns that have not been considered in the past 30 days by the Commission or which are not currently slated for future consideration. So are there any members of the community who wish to make any comments or address the Commission? Okay, hearing none, we will move on. The next item is public hearings. Public hearings involve the taking of public testimony after the city staff members make their presentation on the items in the agenda. We ask that individuals limit their testimony to 3 minutes. Try not to repeat remarks or points of view. A comment is a good comment is a good comment because it's good, not because it's repeated 4 times. So we ask that your consideration in that. And so the first item under the public hearing agenda is item B-11-13, front yard setback variance for Mr. and Mrs. Bogert of 6200 Belmore Lane, Edina, Minnesota. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject property is located at 6200 Belmore Lane. It is located as highlighted. It's on the north side of Belmore. It is to the west of Interlochen Country Club. The property is actually owned by Interlochen Country Club. The property to the south across Belmore Lane is also part of Interlochen Country Club property. The property consists of a single-family lot with a home on it. It's a story and 1/2 home with an attached side-loading garage. It was built in 1917. The country club acquired it in 2005. The property isn't necessary for any sort of zoning ordinance requirements attached to the country club, nor is it necessary for any conditions to their conditional use permit. So they can sell it just as they've acquired it, or they acquired it in 2005. Their plan is to sell the property to a family that wishes to build a home on the site. What you'll notice is that the house that's at 6200 Belmore Lane is very close to the front lot line. It's 28 feet back from the front lot line. And then the house directly to the west is 200 feet back from the front lot line. And then the remainder of the homes on the north side of Belmore Lane range anywhere from 31 to 37 feet back from the front lot line. Now, Edina's front yard setback ordinance changed recently. It used to be that a property owner had a choice. They could either virtually match the homes on either side, or they could match the average front yard setback along the block. The ordinance has changed so that now any new home will have to match the average front yard setback of homes on either side, or match it in an instance where there's only one house adjacent, like in this instance, they would have to match 6204 that's directly west, and they are 200 feet back, which is not consistent with the other homes along the block. Actually, the average on the block is about 60-some feet, and they're proposing the new home to be at a little over 71 feet back. So the new home will actually be further back than the average, but still closer than the house that's adjacent. This is the existing home on the site that will be removed. This is the home that's adjacent to the subject property that's to the west, that's 200 feet back from the front lot line. This is a recent survey of the existing home on that lot, and as you can see, it is quite close. It does list the average front yard setback, including the 200-foot setback of the home next door, is at 68.6 feet. Next door is at 200 feet. Even with the proposed 71.58-foot front yard setback, they're still requiring a variance of 128 feet. This is the new home that's proposed for the site. It's a little difficult to read. All of this long portion is driveway. This is the main part of the house. This would be the garage. There's garage doors here that would face west, and the garage doors that also face south. It breaks up the mass of the garage. You'll only, from the street, you will only see the two garage doors that are facing south. The front of the house actually appears to be quite narrow from the street. There's porch area that's further back here, and then the garage is further back as well. This would be the basement floor plan. The main floor plan, again, this would be looking now westerly at the home, or the side of the home that is next to the most impacted property owner. This is the second floor plan. This is the south elevation of the house, which would be considered the front. This is the portion that would be closest to the street. The garage is much further back, and this element also is much further back. This is the westerly elevation, or the side elevation of the house. Again, you'll only see a two-car garage from the street, two-car garage opening to the west. And then the north elevation, which is considered the rear elevation, and the elevation that is facing east toward Interlochen Country Club. The site is 44,657 square feet in area, so it's quite large. Obviously, the home that's there right now that was built in 1917 predates our current ordinance requirements. The house that was built next door was built many years after that and is much further back, which throws off their ability to get any closer than 200 feet to the front lot line. The question is, the proposed development reasonable for the site? Staff believes the proposal to be reasonable for 4 reasons. The proposed use is permitted in the R1 single dwelling unit district. The architect has indicated that the plan, when it's finalized, will comply with all the ordinance requirements, with the exception of the front yard setback requirement. The home is appropriate in size and scale for the size of the lot. It's a very large lot. It can carry a sizable home. The improvements will provide a reasonable use of the site and improve on existing front yard setback by 42.88 feet, so almost 43 feet back further from the front lot line. The home would provide a deeper front yard setback than the existing home and all other homes on the block, with the exception of the adjacent property. Is the proposed variance justified? Will it relieve practical difficulties that prevent reasonable use? Staff believes the proposed variance is reasonable. The required front yard setback is determined by that adjacent home to the west. The other 4 homes are much closer, between 31 and 37 feet. Are there circumstances that are unique to the property, not self-imposed? Obviously, that home predates our current standards, was built much closer. Will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? The proposed new home will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The home will be surrounded by a golf course on the east and also along the south, and will be further back from Belmore than the existing home is, much further back. Staff recommends approval based on the following findings. With the exception of the variance requested, it will meet all of the ordinance requirements. The proposed use of the property is reasonable as it is consistent with the average front yard setback of the surrounding properties and 1 and 2.5 times farther back from the front lot line than the existing home currently is. The imposed setback severely limits opportunity. The unique circumstance is the original placement of the home relative to the neighboring home to the east. Approval of any variance should be subject to the following conditions. The building plans and elevations date stamped October 2nd, 2011, and the site plan. There is going to obviously be some modification to the plan. This is still preliminary, but the location and the basic massing of the home, the architect and property or the potential property owners indicated that they would maintain the look as you see in the renderings here. With that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Forrest?
I was wondering the significance of the emails that were included in our packet between our historic consultant and the State Historic Preservation Office. Why were they in there?
They probably should not have been if they don't apply to the property. So it was obviously slipped in the packet. I apologize for that.
Other questions of staff? Chris, I have one. There's an email from the Hedblums who live at 6205 Spruce Road. As I'm looking at the map, it appears that there is 6205 doesn't really butt up to Spruce Road unless Spruce Road comes around and does a 90-degree turn and goes from east to west to north to south. So is that strip of land that runs down there between the properties, is that a street? Is it an alley? Is it dedicated? What is that?
It's a very narrow street, and it is Spruce Road. I do believe those are the property owners to the north.
Right, but does that street go through?
Yes, it does.
Then why, if that forms a separate block, then do we still have to worry about the houses all along the street? Why doesn't it just match up with the house next door? Why would that not be the required setback?
The required setback for 6200, this property, is this house.
It is that house, okay.
Right, and that's 200 feet back, and therein lies the issue with that.
So the fact that street's there has really nothing to do with it?
Yeah, it doesn't really have anything to do with it.
Other questions of staff? Okay, thank you. Would the proponent care to make any remarks? If so, please, you don't have to, but if you'd like to, come forward to the microphone and give your name and address.
Why don't we just, if anybody else has any questions, we can answer them, but in the interest of time.
All right.
If you have questions, I'd be happy to ask you, answer them, but
Okay. Appreciate that. Does anybody else wish to speak to this proposal? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Dennis Hogan. I am the owner of 6204 Belmore Lane, and I'd just like to explain to the commission what our family and what we feel about this. The Hogan family built and has resided in the residence at 6204 Belmore Lane for the last 55 years. We originally acquired our property from the former owners of 6200 Belmore Lane, the subject property, Richard and Margaret Wilhoit. I support Matt and Stacy Bogart's request for a variance as presented with the following concerns. Number one, in order to save the sycamore tree near Belmore that is currently on the property next to the current house, The 4-car garage has been positioned in the plan directly behind the new home and very close to the picture windows of our house. Also, the new driveway to service this garage is very long and runs very near to about half the length to our current 6204 Belmore home. This is a concern because the Bogarts have children ranging in age from about 15 years old to the age of 8. It's almost certain to result in a substantial amount of car and or motorcycle traffic for the next 15 years. If there is a way to mitigate this possible problem, it would be deeply appreciated. Number 2 is the reasons that the Bogarts located the garage where it is an attempt to accommodate my family's desire to at least partially preserve a small view of the Interlochen golf course. We would prefer this arrangement over the closer setback, which would be closer to the end of the lot line and entirely block our view. But we are wondering if there is any way to locate the garage closer to Belmore to shorten the driveway and preserve the sycamore and maintain the view. I am not an architect, but I feel there must be a way to do this. Thank you very much for your consideration. We look forward to welcoming Matt and Stacy Bogart and their family as our new neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Other people wish to address the commission? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Let's bring it to the commission here for discussion and comment. Excuse me, Commissioner Scherer.
I'm looking to staff and saying I'm looking at the primary plan and trying to understand where the sycamore in question is. Could you put that on the screen for us, Chris? Okay, that's the one we're discussing. Thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter?
This might be a good time for the applicant to actually address the comments from Mr. Bogart.
Mr. Hogan.
Sure, Mr. Hogan's comments.
I'm
like
sorry.
that, Mr. Bogart.
Yep,
Address
I got
Mr.
it. My
Hogan's
apologies.
comments.
Flip it around.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it brief. Obviously, the site's a little bit narrower than it is wide, and so we're kind of trying to deal with that narrowness, and that's why the driveway kind of runs that length. When we first looked at the site, we thought we would be able to do more of that at the front of the lot, and we had somebody from Rainbow Tree come to kind of go over the various trees on the property, and he's like, "Oh, you're at 6200 Belmore. You're the house with the sycamore," and I thought it was a maple tree. But anyway, he came and said that there's 4 or 5 of these in the Twin Cities that was planted by arborists right after World War II, that it's got another 50 or 60 years of life, and there's only 4 or 5 of them in the Twin Cities, and it would be a shame to lose it. So after that, we said, okay, well, maybe we can't cut it down. And so when we kind of worked through the whole process, the garage ended up moving back there, and trying to be sensitive to the Hogans and trying to make sure that if they wanted to do something with their property in the future, that we wouldn't be completely blocking their view of Interlochen. We tried to bring it as far up as we could and still accomplish what we needed to do, and that's how the house kind of got to be centered where it was. In terms of the traffic in the driveway, we do have children, and they will drive, hopefully. One of the things that we are thinking is there some way that we can provide some sort of landscape buffer, and we haven't done the landscape plan yet, but we are certainly open to the kind of buffering that we could do to create kind of a visual and a sound buffer that would at least mitigate that to the extent we can. So that's kind of the approach that we'd like to take to it, and obviously we're well within the setbacks in terms of where the driveway would locate, so we're not looking to put it any closer to the property boundary than we'd be able to. So that's how I would respond. Any questions?
No, it's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bogert. Commissioner Platter?
Yeah, I just have a question. Would you be amenable to adding a condition to this variance that on the landscaping along that side as part of, that your neighbor would have some review on that and interaction with how that works, if that would be an acceptable solution for that? Or how?
I guess what I would say is we've talked to Dennis and his sister about that, and you were very open to considering it. I do think that, right now that entire property boundary has become overgrown. And so what I can commit to is what we can do on our side of that in terms of getting it cleaned up and getting it more separated. I wouldn't want to have to commit to having some sort of joint agreement about that because I'm not sure they're prepared to participate in that.
No, not necessarily a joint agreement, but something that you would provide landscaping on your side for, whatever in your control. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, well,
so it doesn't get lost in the...
No, I'm very open to saying that we have to properly landscape our house. So, yeah, and it is kind of shown generally on the plans that we submitted that we would try to put some buffering along there. And so I'm open to we realize that has to happen, and we're open to that. So.
Thank you, Mr. Bogert. Other comments, questions from the commission? Commissioner Scherer?
Did you entertain any other potential locations or orientations of the house on the property?
We did. Actually, our architect, Mike Sherritt, is there, and maybe he can talk a little bit more to the specifics of it, but we actually had much more of it towards the front. We had the house more towards the front of the lot, and the garage is more toward the front of the lot, but for the design purposes, you couldn't really get into the garages, and then once we learned about the sycamore, that kind of drove us to try to preserve that in a way that would be available going forward. So if you'd like, I'm sure Mike could talk to it much more eloquently than I.
Well, it strikes me that even with the current design, it's very much it's pushed a bit over to the Hogan's lot line. And I wondered if you ever entertained any idea of moving it, away from that lot line in any other direction.
Well, I think what you're seeing when you look at the plan is it feels like there's a lot of mass near there, but that's really the driveway. The house is really more centered on, the mass of the house is more centered on the lot. And so while if you just looked at that part of it, it would feel like there's a lot of construction right near the Hogan's lot line. Really, most of it is located more towards the center of the lot.
This particular orientation of the garages, while it's appealing from the streetscape that you only see two bays, does end up requiring a lot of asphalt, or whatever your cover is going to be of the driveway. Creates a little mini freeway there. Thank you.
Commissioner Forrest?
I guess to add on to that, one of my concerns is that, it looks graceful, but the driveway, the way it's curved, does orient it more toward the Hogan's house. And also, it's between 16 and 24 feet wide, depending on where you're looking at it. Especially, of course, it's going to be wider in the turnaround area. But that I'm wondering if that might be an area that there could be some compromise.
Commissioner Staunton?
I just want to make sure I'm clear. I understood there was the issue about the sycamore, but then there's a sightline issue. So where's the sightline issue?
Well, the sightline that we're trying to preserve is if you take a look at where the Hogan's house is.
So back toward the rear of the lot?
Right. And then you consider that Interlochen Country Club is on the other side of the lot we're acquiring. if we were to
Move
move
all the
things
way back.
then it would
So the
further block.
So the landscaping doesn't, I was worried that the landscaping would buffer the sound, but also the sight line. But the landscaping stops where the sight line then?
We haven't done any landscaping plan yet, but what I've talked to Mr. Hogan about is because the garage will create kind of an end of our house,
Yeah,
we don't feel like we need to have a lot of buffering that would go
past that.
And so we would be in a position then to, not potentially need to do that. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with their house in the future,
Sure.
and I can't talk to that, but we certainly don't need, we don't feel that there is a need to have any current buffering there. And what I've committed to Dennis and his sister is that we will certainly talk to them about that when we're ready, and if there's some joint thing we want to do to kind of make that common boundary better, we can talk about it. And certainly we don't feel the need to put something up that immediately blocks their view, because that part of our property is going to be the least utilized part of our property, and so we don't feel like there's any immediate need to do that.
And then that backyard backs up to kind of a side yard on the house, the property behind you, right?
Right, and that's the head blooms who are longtime residents who
Right.
are here, and I'm sure would be happy to speak to it. But, if we had our existing setback, we would have to push the house back so that it completely blocked both the Hogan's view and then didn't create any kind of space between our lot and the head blooms lot, so.
So was this where all the generators and equipment went for the
Yes.
Women's U.S. Open? And it was right next to your, yeah, I remember, all right.
Yeah.
It's all coming back to me.
We remember it.
Yeah,
I just
I'm
want to be on the
shuddering
record
too.
to say that I didn't put any generators on the property.
No semi-trucks with generators
No
on them? All right,
semi-trucks.
well, that's good news.
So,
Can I just, one more question, Mr. Chair? For Carrie, or for Chris, actually. So the only variance we're talking about is from the front yard setback. The sides, the rear, everything else, this meets the code.
That's correct. It's a very large lot. It can accommodate a very large home.
And if without a variance, basically, the house would just be pushed back further to the rear of the lot.
Yes, it would have to match the front yard setback of the adjacent home to the
Obscuring that view of the adjacent home to the golf
and
course.
perhaps the one to the north as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Forrest?
Chris, can you indicate, maybe with the help of the proponent and Mr. Hogan, where the Hogan House is located in relation to the plan and the sightlines that we're talking about?
I think this probably gives you the best visual of where the Hogan House is relative to the existing house. Now, there isn't a plan showing the Hogan House on the site plan. Perhaps,
I,
If I could explain this.
sure.
Matt and I worked on this.
Yeah,
Matt
so-
and I discussed this.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Dan.
Dennis Hogan. Right at the end of the garage, from the lot line to the end of the garage, if you can see here, is approximately 90 feet. Our two picture windows on the side, not the ones you see in that redwood picture, we have three picture windows, approximately the same distance as those three that you see there, across the other side here. And the end of the garage comes roughly to the end. There are two picture windows in front of that and one picture window right where the end, that would be blocked kind of by where the end of the garage is. So we would get some visual from the remaining 2 picture windows, and we also, there is another bedroom where our garage is that would also have some visual to the club. So that is, so about the half of the rest of the house then would be running kind of right along where the driveway is. So about half the house would be right where the driveway is running up there now. One other thing I noticed also was that the fire pit kind of extends the length from the lot. I don't know if that could be slanted a little bit to put it closer to the golf course, because I understand that there's a little bit of a setback there, but I don't know if that would give anybody any more room to do any more maneuvering or not. Maybe it wouldn't.
Thank you. Other comments from the commission? Commissioner Platter?
This is just for future stuff. Carrie and Chris, if you could superimpose, on the overall aerial plan, if you could superimpose the new one on there going forward, that would be great, so we could see how they line up versus kind of finger pointing all around. So thanks.
Commissioner Potts?
Just 2 comments, I think, in terms of one that would help preserve perhaps protect the sycamore tree during construction, and perhaps also help the view problem is to, and it's been brought up, to consider adjusting the fire pit relationship to the house to allow the whole house to move a little closer to the golf course. And then I also wanted to echo Commissioner Forrest's concern about the width of that long driveway. I mean, in general, I think this house is very elegant. It's beautiful design architecturally, and I'm certainly personally more in favor of having a garage at the back of the house than at the front, which requires a long driveway. However, indicated on here is even some guest parking along the driveway, which seems to be adding to its width. So just for comments for consideration, completely outside the setback question.
Other comments by the commission? Commissioner Fisher?
Well, I think in general, Commissioner Potts just mentioned it, and I will reiterate it. It actually is a very nice design. I think just to the basic issue of the variance, I think there's foundation for giving a variance here. I mean, I think one thing we really have to look at, I mean, we can try and accommodate everyone to the extent you can, and I actually think it appears that there attempted to be accommodations here. The way I look at it, the variance, this isn't the intention of our variant or of our setback. This is an anomaly in the setback rule, and I look at that and say, do we really expect somebody to build 200 feet back? Is that the intention? I don't think so. The fact that they've made accommodations, I think the design works pretty well, and I guess those are my comments.
Other comments? Is there, if there are no other comments, is there a motion?
I'd move approval based on the staff report findings and recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there further discussion? Commissioner Forrest?
I guess the flip side of what Commissioner Staunton said is that they're asking for a setback variance, and as a result of that, the neighbors are being impacted significantly, if not, I won't say extremely negatively, but they are being impacted, and that it is appropriate for us to consider that as we look at this issue, because we're making an exception, and typically in the past we have either put conditions on things or other requirements. And I'm not sure that that's appropriate right now. I guess I would lean toward addressing the hardscape of the driveway and minimizing that somewhat.
Mr. Chair, can I speak to that issue?
Commissioner Staunton?
I actually think that the variance is helping out the neighbor. I mean, you know, if there wasn't a variance, they would have to move to 200 feet to the rear, and it would completely obscure. There's nothing about the hardcover or the side yard setback or the rear yard setback or any of the other provisions that they need a variance for. So in my view, the variance is already accommodating the neighbor, and I don't see, I mean, I have no trouble attaching conditions if they are, you know, germane to the reason that we're giving someone a break. But in this situation, it seems to me that they're already accommodating the neighbor, and I don't think further accommodation is something that we ought to be mandating. The neighbors are going to live with each other and have to deal with each other, and I guess I would leave it to them to sort that out.
Other comments? Other discussion? Mr. Carpenter?
I generally agree with Commissioner Staunton's comments. I'm wondering, going back to the landscaping buffer along the adjoining property line, I think there's obviously indication of willingness to try to find some mid-ground or work out some kind of arrangement there. And, you know, that I think perhaps is something that where we could perhaps at least ask for a condition or condition the variance on. I'm looking for some help here on this, because I'm not exactly sure how you can frame this in a way that's adequately solid, but that would impose some kind of a duty on the parties to try to work together. I don't know if anybody's more creative than me, but if you're buying into what I'm saying, please offer your thoughts.
You're one of our most creative members.
It's a pretty sad statement, isn't it?
Okay, Mr. Hogan?
I appreciate you doing that. I know this is somewhat out of order here. I would make a suggestion that as long as Matt and Stacy are going to be the people that are eventually going to build this house, I think I can probably work out some kind of an accommodation with them. But since they do not own the property and Interlochen still owns the property, I would kind of hope that it would be specific, that this commission's ruling would be specific to them and not to Interlochen per se.
Okay. Carrie, does a variance request go with the parcel, or does it go with the applicant?
It goes with the parcel.
With the parcel, okay. I would ask the Bogarts if they have any current intentions to not proceed with this transaction.
It depends on if the Greeks default on their debt. I would say that we do have a purchase agreement with Interlochen. We put down a substantial earnest money deposit. Our only condition to closing is whether or not we can get this variance. And if we do get the variance, we're obligated to close within 60 days. That's our current intention. We've spent a lot of money with Mike Sherrod, who's done, I think, a really nice job of trying to balance all of these competing interests. So, our current intention is to close on the property and start constructing as soon as we can. In terms of the landscape buffer, I guess I would say, I've committed to Dennis, I'll commit to you that we will work with the neighbors to do that. Clearly, in the front of our house, that's where we have the biggest need for that buffering. We see that. We've shown it on our plans. We understand it. We haven't done the planning around it yet. I would say that entire property boundary is completely overgrown with scrub trees and buckthorn at this point. And so my only hesitation is I can control what goes on my side of the property boundary. I can't control on what goes on the other side of the property boundary in terms of how that gets cleaned up and organized. And so, our commitment is that our side will be appropriately buffered and look nice and create a visual barrier and sound barrier between our lot and their lot. And, for the foreseeable future, we'll do what we can to preserve whatever sightlines we can towards Interlochen. And, again, I just reiterate that we're not looking for any other variance other than to correct this one anomaly.
Thank you. Other discussion on the motion? Motion is made and seconded to approve the variance request subject to the staff findings and recommendations. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? The variance request has been approved. There is a 2-week appeal process, so I wouldn't, depending on what the Greeks do, I would. I think you should wait at least 2 weeks. But otherwise, the variance process is approved, and you can proceed.
Thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda is item number 2011.0013.11A, preliminary plat approval, New Boy Edition XL Energy at 7777 Washington Avenue South, Edina. I would ask if you could take your conversation outside, please. You're welcome to stay.
That's okay.
Kerry?
Thank you, Chair Grable, members of the commission. Before you is a preliminary and final plat, 7777 Washington Avenue South. The site is located in the far southwest corner of the city, right on the city's boundary with Bloomington and Eden Prairie. It's the last lot on Washington Avenue. This property is unique in that the plat before you is located in both Edina and Bloomington. This is a look at the two, there's actually 4 lots existing on this plat. The Edina property, there's this existing 2-story office building that is somewhat unique in that the parking lot, a portion of the parking lot for the building is located on a separate parcel in the city of Bloomington, located right here. This is a look at how the lots exist today. There are 4 lots, and they're looking to replat these 4 lots into 2 lots that would look like this. The parking lot would then be attached to the property in Edina. There's no changes proposed to the site in Edina. That office building would remain. However, the parking lot would now be located on the same lot. Because the plat is located in both Edina and Bloomington, plat approval is required for both by the city of Edina and the city of Bloomington. XL Energy is the applicant on this project, and they would like to build a substation that would be located right here. That would be in the city of Bloomington. So all site plan approvals would be subject to their jurisdiction, as well as watershed district approval. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the plat before you, based on the findings that the properties located in Edina would not be impacted. The existing building and associated parking areas would now be located on the same lot, and the 2 conditions that would run with this would be final plat approval is required by the city of Bloomington, and all necessary approvals from the watershed district would have to be obtained. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Planning Commission for any questions.
Commissioner Platter?
Does that mean the city of Edina would gain more land when that plot's redone, or does it just mean that it's still in both cities?
Yeah, the municipal boundary stays the same.
Okay.
A portion of this property would be located in the city of Bloomington. So this portion of the lot would pay taxes to Bloomington, and the north portion would pay taxes to Edina.
Other questions of staff? If the subdivision is going to be on the Bloomington side, And if that's where the watershed is, why is it our concern, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just curious, why is it our concern that approval be obtained from the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District?
I guess the plat itself may not require watershed district, so that condition may be overkill.
Okay.
I would assume that would be a requirement of the city of Bloomington as well as part of their site.
I'm not necessarily opposed to it, I was just curious. Commissioner Forrest?
On the plat that we have, it indicates a park and rec easement on the Edina side, a flowage and park and rec easement, and that would still remain. Is that correct? That would be item number, the little circle 2. It's kind of right in the middle. You can see it. And then it's on the
I'm assuming that would remain. That could be a question for the applicant, how they're going to work that. I would assume there might be an existing easement that would run so they can gain access on that southern lot right now. But the applicant, I believe, would be able to answer that.
Where's that? Could you show me where that is?
If you look on preliminary plat, it's the second page of the 2-page thing we have. It's, if you look right here on number 2, it says.
Oh, okay.
And
okay.
then the key to the map over on the right lists the different easements.
I was looking at the wrong 2. Thank you. Other questions of staff? Okay. Would anyone in the public wish to comment on this proposal? Does the proponent wish to comment on the proposal? I think we're going to have some questions for you, so you might as well comment. Rogers
Thank you
or
very much.
Ronders?
Chris Rogers with Excel Energy. I'm a siting and land rights agent. I guess the first thing I'd like to point out, Carrie, if you can go to the next page there on the plat. There we go, right there. The small box that Carrie pointed to towards the west side there, that's actually the control enclosure for the substation. The substation would encompass a larger portion of the area. If I had to draw a box, it would be almost to 9 Mile Creek there, basically. So what you're seeing on the page of the plat there is simply the control enclosure, which I believe is 24 by 40. I do have plans of the substation if you guys would like to see those. We are working with the city of Bloomington for variances, conditional use permit, platting as well, and we are working with 9 Mile Creek Watershed for all the necessary approvals for the project. You also mentioned the easement for the parking that's there, and that easement was granted for the landowner to have access to the parking lot, which is separated from the building. It's my understanding that the easement would still be in place. We are not purchasing that as part of the property. We are simply purchasing the land south in Bloomington for the development of the substation. Lot 2 would remain with New Boy, who are the current owners of the property, and it would be up to them if they wanted to distinguish the easement. I would recommend that they would keep that. My understanding is that the lots would be split by a municipal boundary, however, would have 2 separate PID numbers paying taxes to 2 different districts. I'd be happy to answer any of the questions that the commissioner may have.
Other questions, any questions of the proponent at this time? Okay, thank you, Mr. Rogers.
You're welcome.
Would anyone else care to comment on this proposal? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed, so questions, discussion by the commission. This is such a controversial proposal. Is there a motion? Commissioner Carpenter?
Based on the staff report, findings, and any conditions that are in here, I would move to approve the proposal.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the proposal. Carrie, I do have one question. You mentioned this is preliminary and final?
That's correct. I would intend to bring both preliminary and final to the city council so they can approve it in one motion.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion is adopted. Okay. Next section of the agenda deals with reports and recommendations. We have 3 ordinance amendments to discuss. The first one of my favorite topics, deals with an ordinance amendment concerning drive-throughs. And I understand that, Carrie, do you want to start this discussion, and then we'll ask Julie if she'd like to speak?
Certainly. You may recall back in 2009, the city amended the zoning ordinance to allow drive-throughs. In the PCD 1 zoning district, it was for a specific project, basically on Valley View and Wooddale. That project did not proceed, and so the drive-through was not included in that site. The Planning Commission recommended denial of that ordinance. I've copied the minutes from that within your packet. And Julie Risser is here. You're a former Planning Commission member, now sits on the Energy and Environment Commission. And they're proposing an ordinance that's before you that would essentially repeal that ordinance. Also, in addition to doing that, there would be a number of conditions that would be added on all of our drive-throughs within the city, within all of our zoning districts. So the ordinance before you, we're asking that you give it some consideration, and in particular the conditions that would then be placed on all of our drive-through facilities within the city. I could go through those, or if Julie would like to do that, I guess we could do it either way. Certainly. In addition to the again, the PCD 1 district would, that's our neighborhood commercial zoning district, so drive-through facilities would not be allowed within those zoning districts. Additional requirements for your consideration would be that any drive-through facility would need to be located 300 feet from a residential property. Current code is 20 feet. And there's also a requirement for non-idling signs that would need to be posted in drive-through lanes. So if the intention here is cars cannot idle when they're waiting in line, that might be something Ms. Risser could elaborate on what the thinking was there with the Environmental Commission. The next condition is drive-through facilities would be subject to, basically that's review and approval of the city engineer, and there's a number of conditions that go along with that. A traffic impact study would be required for any drive-through. And letter K on the second page is an air quality standard. That the condition would be that all drive-throughs would have to be closed in the city of Edina if the air quality index exceeds 101, and that's a statewide index, but I'm not sure if that's posted daily. I've been checking that site since receiving this ordinance. We wouldn't have had to close down any drive-throughs within the last couple of weeks, given that air quality standard. The concern staff would have in having this kind of a requirement would be enforcement moving forward. Someone would have to monitor what the air quality index is, and then it's getting those drive-throughs to close. Could be an enforcement issue. So those are the conditions that are asked of you to consider this evening.
Thank you, Carrie. Questions of staff? Julie, would you like to come forward and talk about this a bit, please?
It's odd to be here. First, I'd like to say that former Commissioner Carwin Kata really helped with this as well, and so I'd like to acknowledge him, and he's now off at Harvard. So a lot of this work really came from him. One thing that I'd like to clarify is that for the non-idling signs, we do not have the right to enforce a prohibition against engine idling. What we would like is a recommendation, please turn off your engines. And that is something that we're pursuing for signage near schools, on streets that are controlled, not school property. But I did want to clarify that. We do feel very strongly that a traffic impact study must be prepared, and part of that is also because of the initial proposal. If you looked at the site where the drive-through was being proposed, it really was a high-traffic area, and we heard a lot of concern from residents in that sector of our city.
Questions for Ms. Risser? Commissioner Potts, and then Commissioner Scher.
The 300-foot distance, where does that come from? And I guess if I could just add to that, if we don't settle this tonight, it'd be interesting to see a map of what is then available for drive-throughs.
If you look at the supporting material, the history of this, Edina's 20-foot setback is really very minimal. Wayzata has a 50-foot setback, St. Louis Park, Minnetonka, 100 feet, Richfield, 150, Plymouth is at 300, and then we have Apple Valley, Eden Prairie, and Lakeville determining setbacks by building height. So what we're getting at with the 300-foot setback is that Edina really is on one end of the spectrum with a 20-foot setback. And in fact, if you look at other setback requirements that our city imposes, one that comes to mind is tool sheds, I think. They have to be set back 75 feet, but a drive-through only needs to be set back, 20 feet. So it's working with that.
So that puts us at the other end of the spectrum.
Right.
Really,
We're kind of trying to.
Municipalities.
Exactly. So.
Okay. I like that.
Thank you, Chairman. I was looking at Section K, the air quality standard requiring that the drive-throughs close if the state index exceeds 101. And do we know what other municipalities are doing with that, or is this a new bit of
This
new
would be
territory?
kind of cutting edge for
Cutting edge,
Edina.
okay.
However, it would be supporting the MPCA when they do have those poor air quality days. And if you look at recommendations that come out, they do say that people really should be discouraged from needless driving, engine idling, and that sort of thing. So it's helping them out.
Okay. And I guess I would then ask staff at some point in this discussion to talk about a little bit more, I guess I need more information about how frequently that would occur. Sounds like you are not really aware of that yet, Carrie. You haven't done that.
I'm not. I just learned about the website maybe a week or so ago, and I've been checking it periodically just to see if anywhere in the state have exceeded that. And I did notice 4 or 5 days ago, Detroit Lakes exceeded that standard, and it didn't give an explanation of why or what was going on up there. So we would have to do a little
Commissioner
more
Risser,
research.
do you have any idea from the?
It usually is something that really happens more frequently during August. And sometimes when you're driving toward downtown Minneapolis, you'll see sort of this haze over the city, and you can't see buildings that clearly. It's also something that happens on and around the 4th of July because people are firing off so many fireworks. So it is something that's influenced by, direct human activity as well as the climate. Sometimes there'll be days in the winter where you'll have a weather system come in where the air just does not move around very much at all. And I think it was maybe 5 winters ago, we were hit with several days like that. So that's part of it. The other thing is standards for air quality are now being looked at again by the federal government, and we may end up with some tougher, higher standards that we should be supporting
Okay,
on the municipal and state level.
thank you.
Commissioner Staunton.
On the idling, it makes intuitive sense to me that more idling creates more emissions, but, you know, there's this notion with stop signs that sometimes the stopping and starting is louder because you're braking and then and so I guess I'm wondering, is there something behind the idling? Have we done any studying behind the idling to confirm our intuition that in fact
It's worse than starting and stopping. There are studies, and I apologize, I think it was if you're idling more than something like 30 seconds, it's worth turning off your engine, but then it depends on what kind of car you're driving. That plays into it as well, so it's hard to really get those figures down. One thing that I'd like to really note is that, again, the idling signs would be, please turn off your engines, messaging along those lines. So we wouldn't say you absolutely have to turn off your engine, and we're going to have somebody prohibiting it.
and all I'm trying to get at is whether we know that that'll actually make things better, or are we going to inadvertently
Yes.
make things worse?
We do know it'll make things better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that there's a certain period of time, I mean, so is there more emission just from the starting activity itself that, but if you turn it off for a certain period of time, then you more than exceed what you gain from that?
You know, I think you have
follow
to.
what I'm saying?
No, I do. You'd have to turn it off and turn it on pretty rapidly.
Okay.
And I think with most drive-throughs, the service would not really permit that. Not, you know, you wouldn't be getting your, whatever it is that you're doing through the drive-through done as quickly to permit that to happen. I can't really think of any
Okay.
situation where that would occur.
And then I noticed there was something in here about prohibiting, and I can't tell whether it's prohibiting the sale of food and beverages. Does that imply that other things by drive-through would be okay, or?
We would be going back to the original drive-through stipulations that we had before this change, so that, you know, banking would be permitted, car washes would be permitted, drugstores could market drugs through
So
windows.
before we had this application come in front of
Exactly.
us, it was just for those non-food and beverage
Right,
in the PCD one?
right.
Because didn't something like the Starbucks over at Grandview, is that not in PCD one? Is that?
That is not in PCD one.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe, right? That's a, yeah, that's a
That's
different
correct, that's
district.
PCD
Yeah.
2.
I'm rusty.
Commissioner Scher, did you have a question, Commissioner Scher?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Commissioner Forrest?
I was wondering if you'd considered at all, if we're talking about impact on neighboring neighborhoods, headlight pollution, and, I mean, sight lines are mentioned in traffic, but I think that has to do with safety sight lines. And I guess I can anticipate, if there were a new facility put into place, that the headlights, there's always that potential for headlights going into people's homes.
I'm afraid I'm not following.
If you live at the end of a T street and the headlights are coming right at you, I guess I'm thinking if you're in a residence that's near a drive-through facility,
Right,
the headlights from the cars impacting your home.
okay.
That's what I'm,
So you mean when turning the engines off, or?
just in general.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'm, yeah.
If you go to the drive-through facility and it happens to be the stacking bays are pointed toward my house, I'd be getting the headlights in my house, and the light
Okay,
pollution.
light
yeah.
pollution is something that is on the radar of the Energy and Environment Commission, but not, we really have not had an opportunity to look at that closely, but that's a good point. I don't know if that could be somehow woven into this. I think that might be a little bit, that would go to the design of a specific project. Although,
So is, okay, if I might, as I understand it, this change, the change that we're doing here would essentially prohibit restaurant drive-throughs in PCD1 areas, and in addition would require any new drive-through any place, they'd have to put up a sign about no idling, and they would be subject to the air quality standard. And they'd have to do the other things. So the existing drive-throughs, would they have to put up a sign?
I would hope so. I think.
Sure. Okay, Commissioner Platter, you had a question?
Hey, Julie.
Hey, Mike, how'd you get to the center so fast?
I don't know.
I was on edge for years.
Didn't really want to be here. Two questions. So the non-idling signs, I'm just wondering, you talked about, please no idling signs. When I read this, it looks to me like you're prohibiting idling.
Right, and
so
I do want to clarify, it was not
Clar-
our intention to be prohibiting it,
Yeah.
but to post no idling signs, no, so if that could be a change that was made, that would be much appreciated.
And then are there other places that have this? I'm just wondering how it works in practicality on if you have 8 people waiting in McDonald's drive-through, are people turning off their, do people do that 8 times before they get to the front? I'm just curious from a practical standpoint if there's any other communities that have done this that have anything with that.
It is a bigger, they're doing more with it in Madison than they are here in the local Twin City area. I know personally, since I drive a Prius, when I go through the drive-through, I cut my heating, and that immediately kills the gas-powered part of my engine, and I can still listen to the radio off of the electric battery. But I think it is a reminder. We haven't really seen that many communities put up these signs. A lot of times they're more frequently found at parks, and so it is again kind of something that is unfortunately more cutting edge, and it should be something that is more prevalent in other communities. There are a whole range though of no idling signs or recommendations for no idling signs out there, and I do want to say that we would recommend the ones that were pretty basic with a line through the key. It wouldn't be the ones that are more artistic and have children looking like they're, conked out and dying from fumes and things like that. But no, there aren't a lot of studies that indicate how successful the signs are.
Commissioner Potts?
I think for me, that falls into the awareness category, similar to stormwater signs that remind people that this
Don't dump
drains
paint.
to the lake.
Yeah.
So I, support some consideration of discouraging idling in the same way.
And part of the purpose of the EEC is to educate. We do try.
Commissioner Chakowski?
I was wondering about item K. So is your intent for drive-throughs to be closed immediately after the air quality index is determined to be higher than 101, or would it be after like a prolonged period of that air quality index being above it, or like would there be a warning or something?
This would be, it's a recommendation that they do close on days where those air quality warnings are being issued. It would be something that would be kind of along the lines of snow emergency alerts and things like that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Commissioner Carpenter?
Julie, on the issue of the air quality, just to start with, you made some comment about, I think in Detroit Lakes, there have been some indications where it's gone above there, or was that?
Kerry noted that he
said
recently,
yeah.
I have not been checking the air quality index lately.
The reason I'm asking is I'm wondering how site-specific it is. In other words, if the air quality is really bad over the immediate downtown area, does that mean that it's, is there a way to measure it for just like Edina specifically, or?
There is. I don't know if we have such a device in our fair city measuring the air quality. I don't think we do.
And maybe I
Yeah.
didn't say it perhaps the right way, but if it can be measured, I guess I'm wondering, is there a, who does it right now? Who measures this stuff?
The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency is the agency that issues the alerts.
Okay.
And my understanding is that they do have devices around the area and other parts of Minnesota where they can get the readings. And you're talking about, Edina, when you're thinking about the air and air quality, we as a first-ring suburb really pretty much are getting the air quality that Minneapolis, St. Paul, places like that are getting. It's not like we're in a bubble that's protected, and we're close enough to freeways, which are a major cause of air quality pollutants, that it wouldn't be, when they issue an alert for the Twin City area, it definitely does include Edina.
It does?
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure about that. And then with respect to the 300-foot setback requirement, I'm assuming the purpose of that is either exclusively or mostly for sound reasons, is that, or am I getting that wrong? Are there other reasons for the setback?
Yeah, well, there are. When you think about how a structure like a drive-through can influence a community, it is sound, that's one thing, but it's also traffic flow. And, when we look at the comprehensive plan and how it really was promoting pedestrian walkway and alternative forms of transit, it's looking at one part of our city and really kind of delivering a major blow to that. It's hard to really bring together bikeways, walkways, streets, and and then include the drive-through on top of that, and continue to move forward in a way that is in sync with the comprehensive plan as well as green stops. So
Okay.
that's the thinking there.
And just sticking on the sound piece for a moment, did you look at all at restrictions with respect to limiting the audio volume that comes out of these speakers? I mean, there are ways to center that or focus that just like you can with lights, I know. And
Right, and you, I think, can have greater success really controlling the communication devices that the operator would provide, but it's very difficult to control the sound from the vehicle. Some are very loud, some are not quite so loud, and then you oftentimes will have people communicating while their window is down, and that creates noise as well. So if only it were just caused by the business, but it's also by the consumer.
Thanks.
Commissioner Fisher?
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Just curious, I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, I think, unless I misheard you, you were asking earlier about the PCD 1 district. What you're doing here is saying there are no drive-throughs in a PCD 1.
Right.
And then in addition to that, we're putting more restrictions on the other areas where we might have drive-throughs.
Right, and
Okay.
part of it has to do with rewriting ordinances and making recommendations. The process is somewhat cumbersome, and so we kind of thought,
Right.
yeah.
So I'm not sure about the 300-foot setback, and I guess I'd have to look at, my concern about that one, I mean, it could be a great idea, but it's like one of those things where you have to look at all the potential districts and what, are we pretty much precluding drive-throughs from everywhere, or, what kind of sites would work or wouldn't work. The other question I have is the whole air quality standard. The way things work now, air quality in Minnesota is really monitored in a sense by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if there's an air quality issue in the Twin Cities, it's going to be it's typically going to be a regional or Twin Cities regional issue that day or that week.
Mm-hmm.
But with this scenario, Edina would be closing the drive-throughs, but Richfield and everything around us could be business as usual.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, while I don't disagree with, that would be a good solution on those kind of days, I think it could be a problem if a city is all of a sudden shutting down our businesses in effect, while the next city or cities are not. And I'm just wondering if the reality isn't that if this, continues to be an issue in the future, that it wouldn't really be more of a regional mandate, coming from the state saying, and I'm thinking back to when we used to have the vehicle check centers where you have to come in and have your exhaust or emissions checked and all that, it becomes sort of a top-down type thing rather than a bottom-up, which is what this is proposing,
Right.
coming from a city.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's my only concern, is that I don't disagree, I think the idea is good, I think it needs to be more of a top-down thing.
I can appreciate
so the playing
logic
field is
in that.
level for businesses.
I can definitely appreciate the logic in that. And perhaps there'd be other ways to kind of reward drive-through, or businesses that had drive-through windows, instead of saying you can't do it. Perhaps it could be on air quality alert days, if your operation is willing to step up and shut down. I don't know, maybe there could be some kind of perk or something. It could go the other way, I guess. And I can certainly see the logic of your point, and that was something that we did talk about in the working group. However, we kind of also felt, well, we really need to step up and do something. And when the MPCA is issuing those air quality alerts, what exactly is it that municipalities should do? It's a serious thing. You've got the elderly, you've got people with asthma, small children, really hit hard. And so
Do we know how many drive-throughs we have in Edina today?
We don't really have that many.
I don't think so.
And so we do have some banks that do have drive-throughs. I use one frequently. And then now we have, CVS has the drive-through, and I'm just trying to think. There's Starbucks
and some car washes.
And car washes. I think it'd be very difficult for car washes to meet this standard and that.
Yeah, if I might respond to both of that, the issue I have with the air quality standard is, one, enforcement, how are we going to enforce it?
Mm-hmm.
But if I run a bank or I run a CVS pharmacy and I have a drive-through on the days when the pollution standards are high and I'm required to shut down my drive-through, you can still make deposits and you can still get money out of a bank because you park your car and you walk in.
Mm-hmm.
But a car wash,
Mm-hmm.
the whole purpose of the car wash, you can't park your car.
It's integral to the operation.
It's integral to the operation of the car wash.
Yep.
So it would seem to me that, I would be more comfortable with the air quality standard if we accepted car washes from that requirement, because you got to have the drive-through for a car wash because that's what it is.
I agree.
Otherwise, the more we can get rid of drive-throughs, I think it's a good idea. Not that I have any strong opinion about it. Commissioner Scherer.
Well, there are three areas where I wish we had some more information.
Okay.
I do wish we had, the alluded to by several commissioners, map of the affected areas with the 300-foot setback. I think that would be really helpful in eliminating some of the concerns that some of the commissioners might have. The non-idling sign issue, I guess I'm just going to accept, I'd like more information, but if we're to be cutting edge as we look at that, I'm fine with the suggestion, although I will tell you, I'm on a first-name basis with everybody at Starbucks in that drive-through, and I would probably have to turn my car on and off 7 times to get through that line, because it moves more quickly than a food chain, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think I'd probably cause more noise by constantly turning my car on and off, and I don't know what the impact would be on the environment. It would happen so quickly between on and offs. So there can be a variety. So I think of it as an educational tool more than always practical in every situation. And the third area is with the 101 air quality. There are businesses, and our chairman was just getting at this, the Starbucks again, because I know it the best of every drive-through in town. There is no place to park there if you can't go through that drive-through.
There's lots of places to park.
No, it's full most of the time. It's very hard to get into Margot's Patisserie. That lot is a nightmare.
If it weren't, if it weren't for that Starbucks and that drive-through, we probably would not have an issue with drive-throughs in the city of Edina.
You'd effectively cut off an awful lot of the Starbucks business if we shut that drive-through. So, and I use it only as an example because I know it, that there could be varying impacts on the businesses in our community, and I think we'd need more information about, again, how often this would occur, what does a year of this look like, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So I'm wanting more information, I guess, on some of these topics before a final decision is made.
Commissioner Cherkasky?
I was just thinking that, like myself, if I had been going to a drive-through on a day that it was closed, I could like see myself kind of circling the drive-through and still going through it, and then like upon finding out that it was closed, like driving around to find a parking space. And if this had happened to multiple people, then the parking lot would be pretty full and everyone would kind of be looking around. And I'm just wondering if that would really be saving exhaust with people circling drive-throughs, like when they're not sure if they're open or not.
I think those situations, the days when we do have the air quality alerts are not that many. And so I think if you look at the kind of consider the big picture, it would definitely be a positive benefit. And I think also that the education that accompanies some of these suggested changes could really help as well. Really encouraging people not to use drive-throughs and sit with the engine idling. Again, the engine idling signs would be a gentle reminder. And for Starbucks customers, if they felt that it really wasn't something that was environmentally sound and it's clipping along and cars are moving forward in less than 30 seconds, everyone's getting their coffee in about 29 seconds and paying for it and getting adjusted and zipping off, then, it would be something that I think people probably would ignore. I have heard people say they've been in that line for the Starbucks coffee over 15 minutes. And so I think there's a range of anecdotal material out there about the Starbucks. I'm also thinking that it's possible in this era where people are, especially businesses, trying to promote environmentally sound products and practices that, I could see a Starbucks creatively embracing this in our fair city and saying, oh, it's an air quality alert day. We are closing our drive-through and we're giving you this particular kind of deal, and come on in. And they might actually maybe see a benefit of having their regular drive-through customers actually set foot in the store. It's possible those people might buy a mug or a cookie or something like that. So I think it's easy to make some hypotheses about negative results, but I think it's also, now that I'm not on the Planning Commission, possible to see some potential benefits.
And
maybe I have more rosy glasses. Yeah.
We are poorer for the fact that you are not still on the Planning Commission. If I might just make a comment about the 300-foot, because there's been some discussion about keeping this away from residential districts. And, do we really need to see a map? I mean, it'd be nice to know, but do we really need to see a map of these places to see? I think it's important for us to strongly consider a 300-foot barrier from residential areas. I work for a company that builds instruments that measure air pollution and air pollutants. And those instruments are used, some of the research applications are used along highways and that type of thing to measure pollution from automobiles. And it's striking the difference that exists over a period of distance from a highway or from a motorway on what happens. And the further away you can have, the further you can keep automobiles concentrated from a residential area, I think it's very important, because if I'd thought about it, I'd have brought some of the studies, but it does make an impact. So I think the 300 feet is a good idea.
Commissioner Teague, do you have a map that shows these regions that could easily be popped up on people's I don't know what the computer
I
allows you to do.
I don't have a zoning map
Okay.
with me.
After the comp plan, everyone should have it memorized.
Commissioner Forrest?
I guess I was going to say, my opinion regarding the 300 feet is that I think it is a good idea. Plymouth, in the materials, it says that Plymouth does have a 300-foot setback from single-family residential. And if we're just talking about from single-family residential, I think, well, especially if we're limiting it somewhat in the PCD ones, the rest of the commercial districts have enough property around them or are already set back from residential, single-family residential districts significantly in general. I'm sure there are exceptions, but regarding putting in any new drive-throughs, I think that the 300-foot setback would work to help mitigate not only noise, but the direct effects of the idling and also the light pollution, sound pollution from people, booming their radios in the summertime while they're sitting in line. So I think it's a positive thing.
And the exceptions are what the variance process is for those particular instances where, for whatever reason, it does create a hardship on the property. Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't necessarily have any problem with the 300-foot. I always like to, I always think about when I lived in Boston, and the whole thing in Boston was they always just create little tweaks in the zoning that essentially prohibited things, but they just didn't want to say that. And so if we don't, like for instance, if all of the parcels along single-family residential neighborhoods aren't deep enough to effectively do anything with a 300-foot setback, you might as well just say there will be no drive-throughs on parcels adjacent to single-family neighborhoods. And that's all I was wondering is, what are we doing here? And, so I don't have the issue with the 300 feet. I think that's a reasonable thing. It's just sometimes it's good to know what the ramification really is.
Mm-hmm. No, and I like the dialogue.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Staunton.
Kind of picking up on that point, I'm when I look in the report, the cities are all over the place. I mean, Plymouth is the largest with 300 feet, but there's 50 feet, 100 feet, 150 feet, no feet, just building height. And if we're going to make a recommendation to the council about getting rid of drive-throughs in certain areas and then adding additional restrictions in other areas, I just think we have to really support that with data and information so that it's not just kind of our notion that we don't generally like these things and so we think you ought to get rid of them. And so I'd like to know more about why Plymouth says 300 feet. Is it when other cities say less than that? I'd like to know more about why we would be the first to do, to rely on the state standard. Is it what Commissioner Fisher was mentioning, that a lot of cities say, well, if you have a drive-through on this side of the border and a drive-through on that side of the border and we have to close on that day, the people just go to that side of the border and go through their drive-through. The idling question, I think, there needs to be some discussion. I am a patron of that Starbucks as well. I tend not to use the drive-through, but I've observed exactly what Commissioner Scherer is talking about, that you move up, and so I think you would turn your car off and on 7 or 8 times if you were going to stop from idling. And I don't know, as I sit here, whether that's better or worse for the environment.
Well, I think it's not the number of times you turn it on and off, but the length of time that you're in the line and then doing that. Because if you're in the line for 15 minutes and you turn it on and off 7 or 8 times versus 5 minutes. But I do know they say 30 seconds over that you're supposed to turn it off if you're hanging out waiting. But
who?
We could look into studies we could do more research on this
Well, and I don't know that it needs more research. I feel like we have to kind of,
Yeah.
if we're going to say to the council, I mean, this is, you know, there's going to be some people who don't like this idea.
You're right, yes.
And we ought to have our ducks in a row to make sure we've got data that says, you know, this is what the science says, and this is, you know, we are actually making things better. And
Yep.
and so I'm intrigued with the idea, but I think we have to kind of work it a little further before I'm ready anyway to recommend that the council make these changes.
I think the working group, you know, if what I'm hearing is that there is a level of discomfort with the non-idling signs, as well as the air quality standard. And if those are the 2 points of contention, and it's going to hang this up from moving forward, we could drop those points.
Let me make a suggestion here. I am enjoying this discussion very much. But I was thinking today as I read through these things that when a proposed ordinance amendment does come to this commission, there is often a lot of discussion. And sometimes we try and change things on the fly, and I'm not sure that's the best way to do it. And maybe we ought, as a commission, in general, and then I'll speak specifically to this proposal, but in general, if there's going to be an ordinance amendment to be considered, that our practice be that we have a meeting to discuss the ordinance proposal and raise comments and have discussion, and then not take action on that night, but wait until at least the next meeting when some of our concerns are able to be addressed by the staff and by who's ever proposing the ordinance, and then we have a better foundation upon which to make a recommendation, yea or nay, at that future meeting. So I think I'd like to see us as a matter of policy that we handle ordinance amendment recommendations on a two-meeting process. And secondly, if I might, then I'll get to you. With respect to this particular one, I would suggest that we follow that procedure, that your commission take a look at some of our comments and staff take a look at some of our comments, and then we bring this back at a later meeting so we can have some of the questions answered and be able to more accurately or with more knowledge make a decision on the issue.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Now, Commissioner Staunton.
And along those same lines, Carrie, can you remind us, just from a notice perspective, with this kind of proposed amendment to the zoning code that didn't come as part of an application for rezoning, is there any kind of notice? How might people be aware that we're noodling on this issue?
It's the city council that does the public hearing.
Okay.
But it's been our past practice here over the past couple of years to, when we're considering the zoning ordinance, I've changed the format a little bit with this memo, but typically we introduce the topic and do discuss it for a couple of meetings. We do have on our website the zoning ordinance update button. This could be one that we add. So all of this information is posted on the website as well.
So it's not a requirement that we have a public hearing on something like this. We're making a recommendation to the council. It'd be nice to have input, I suppose, from the public on some of these things, but it's not.
That's correct. With something like this, the way it's structured now, this would apply to all of our drive-throughs. It would be fair to them to notify them that these changes are coming. Another thing that I would throw out for the commission to consider is that all of our drive-throughs are just permitted uses, and if they meet these conditions, they can do it. You might note in the table comparison of other cities, I think the majority of cities require these kind of uses as a conditionally permitted use. So something for us to consider. Do we want to make drive-throughs a conditional use? That requires review by Planning Commission and Council. And at that time, some of those standards can be added to the conditional use through that process.
Commissioner Carpenter?
I almost wonder if we might be better off going back to what we were doing a couple of years ago with respect to work sessions for some of these things. I find it very difficult to draft and try to think through ordinances kind of on the fly as we sit up here, taking testimony back and forth and trying to plug in information that I think can sometimes be done more thoughtfully if we are sitting in a work session.
Commissioner Scheer?
Just as a sort of a tag along to that comment by Commissioner Carpenter, one of the things I was thinking as we were particularly looking at the air quality standard is when we're talking about this in this kind of a meeting, we're focusing on one particular item. And the ramifications of that as it might apply to other parts of the code don't really get a hearing. For example, I think everybody knows one of my favorites are fire pits. And that same standard would certainly, if we're going to apply it in one area, why would we not apply it in other areas? And that kind of discussion doesn't happen when we're focused on one ordinance per se in this meeting.
Other comments? Commissioner Forrest?
Back on the 300 feet thing, I guess it would be nice, too, to know how we're going to measure that. Is it from the drive-through window? Is it from the stacking bays? Be more specific on that in the language as well, so that it's clear, so that people can maximize the use of the property, the allowed uses of the property, if it fits within whatever standards we set.
We were thinking about it from the drive-through window. All righty then. So.
A radius.
Just right, exactly. The closest distance could be that.
So then, with respect to this proposal, how about if your commission takes another look at this?
Okay, and specifically, so specific direction is the no idling or please do not idle signs, the air quality. I just want to make sure, because a lot of time goes into this, and the ordinance revision process is one that is rather cumbersome. And so I want to go back and be more efficient.
Exactly.
So
we talked about the 300 feet.
Right.
We talked about the air quality standards.
Okay.
Those, and the idling signs.
All right.
And I think the idling in general. I mean, I get the intuition about you're running the car, it's spewing out emissions. I just wonder if anybody has looked at this issue of, if you're going to stop and start and stop and start, how does that impact things? If there's data
again, I think, if we think about how frequently are you going to be starting and stopping and starting and stopping versus, for most cases, you would turn it off and there'd be a period of time. But I understand we could drop the no idling.
Well, and I get all I'm saying is
right.
is you and I can say that sitting here, and I get the intuition of it, but I'd like to have something to rely on that says this is a good idea, other than we think it's a good idea.
Okay. But would that be, I go to Starbucks, I see how many cars are lined up, on average every every hour, and what the stacking ends up being maximum at high business hours.
No.
I mean, this could be
fair question. That is not at all what I'm asking. What I'm asking is there in the scientific literature, is there in the regulatory literature, is there in the kind of regulatory world of other cities who maybe have dealt with drive-throughs and the emissions that are created by them, is there some discussion of this notion that we intuitively think if you shut off your car it's going to make it better, but somebody maybe has explored the fact that, boy, when you turn it on and off and on and off and on and off, then it actually makes it worse. That's all I'm asking is there research
and I know
out
there is, and I know because in Europe you have cities where people do stop and turn out their engines at stoplights, and the data does support that. So I can certainly find that. That's not going to be that hard to find.
I think we just want to have we want to have that for the record as if we're going to make a recommendation to the council.
That's fair enough. Yes. Right. Okay. Well, thank you
Thanks.
for your,
Commissioner Potts?
One last comment on the air quality issue. I guess I would suggest maybe taking that off the table relative to drive-through ordinances and the
Okay.
EEC taking a more broader view of air quality in the city and looking at the fact that under certain climatic conditions, we tell people you can only water your lawn certain days. Should that extend to single-stroke engine, lawnmowers? Under certain conditions, we tell the school buses it's not safe for you to drive through the snow. Well, wouldn't it be the same on a poor air quality day? School buses.
right, and the school buses do have to stop their engines from idling. Parents do not. But, right.
Sure, yeah, I'm just saying to take a more holistic look.
Right,
you know,
yeah.
at it.
Okay.
Commissioner Forrest?
And I guess, again, if you're looking at any setbacks, I would like to see if there are any other municipalities that consider something beyond the service window, because it could be that the greatest impact is because of the cars that are lined up around the corner of the building closer to a residential area than, within the service window area.
Right.
You got about 3 months worth of work there.
Well, now we have another, we can keep busy, so thank you. And we'll be back.
Commissioner Fisher?
Chair Grable, just, it's interesting, when you sit in, the more you talk about this, the more you realize that, we're trying to come up with solutions to a line of cars, kind of following closely behind each other, getting up to a single window. And if you really think about it, and maybe this is where you do get innovation ultimately, is if cities really did start putting pretty strict controls on idling cars, maybe sites get designed differently. We're just thinking inside the box about how we do drive-throughs, but if you imagine coming into a site, speaking into something, taking an order, and then going and parking in one of 10 parking spots, stopping, turning off your car, and then the light comes on with your number, and then you start your car and go and pay and go. I mean, there are maybe other ways sites can be used.
Cars get designed differently. In
Yeah.
Europe,
Yeah.
when you stop, the car automatically, the engine stops. And when you're ready to start, as soon as you put your foot on the gas and start to let the clutch out, the engine will start up and you can go. So
5 years from now, it may not be
cars
as
are
much of an
designed,
issue.
cars can be designed differently as well.
Yeah.
All right. You'll take this back to your commission, and then presumably when you're ready to have us to take a look at this again, we will have a meeting when we start to talk about it, and then extend it on to at least another meeting before we make a recommendation to council. With respect to Commissioner Carpenter's comment about how we do consider these, we'll take a look at that, and maybe you're right that the more informal sessions that we had might be a little bit better way to hash some of these things out. But so we should take a look at that, Carrie, and we'll proceed. Thank you very much for bringing this to us. Next item, revision to approve site plans. Carrie?
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. The next two ordinances are ones that we have discussed several times over the past few months. And the ordinance before you, I have revised based on our discussion at last month's meeting in regard to site plans. Conditions 4 and 5 have been added to try to address those concerns, and that being that any change to any condition that's been placed on a site plan, including building material and color. So if that were to occur, the site plan would have to come back for your approval. Also, if the property is located in an Edina Heritage Landmark District, that would also have to come back to you. So I will, in the interest of time, open it up for discussion and try to answer any questions you might have.
Comments, questions from the Commission? Commissioner Platter?
Just have a real minor thing on number 4. Do you want to say building materials and colors? It's really minor. Plural.
Other comments? Commissioner Staunton?
Okay, so the one-time thing. One time within what time frame? I mean, if we, so somebody comes in, just help me think through this. Somebody comes in for a site plan approval, and then they want to make a change, then this all applies to that one. But if then there's a subsequent change, then it doesn't matter how minor it is, they have to come back through.
Correct.
And is there any time period that would cover? Is there any limitation on or is it the ownership, or does it run with if somebody sells it and then somebody else picks it up and says, well, we want to do the same thing, we just need this little difference?
The site plan has an expiration date, and it's usually December 31st of the following year or 2 years from the approval. So if it doesn't get built within that time, the whole site plan expires.
Okay.
So that would be the provision that kicks in. They get one chance to make a minor revision from the time that the project is approved and the time that the site plan would expire.
And in any event, the only consequence would just be that you have to come through and get a formal approval from the commission and the council.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Platter?
So I think the intent of that one time, if I'm recalling correct, was really about the kind of the floor area and dwelling units, wasn't it? So people didn't keep coming back. I guess the color and the building materials, is that really our intent, that you have one shot for a minor there too? Or should it just apply to the kind of the broader things to this? I'll leave it open for discussion.
I think anytime you're changing the building materials or the colors, you would need to come back.
No, we say you only come back once. And I'm saying, is that our intent, that you can only come back once with the building and materials? I thought our discussion really on the only one time was on the sizes and, some of the broader pieces, so people didn't keep flip-flopping on the sizes of the dwelling units.
Staff can only make a one-time change, but if you change the building materials or color, that's above and beyond a minor change, and those get brought back, if I'm understanding the question right.
I guess maybe I'm not explaining it real well. We say minor changes can only be authorized one time. By the planner one time, correct, by the planner. But we talk about other pieces within here, maybe, maybe it's covered.
One other point, Mr. Chair. So in items 1 and 2, well, a couple of points. First, the technical point, just in items 1 and 2, we use the word "and" in between, but then we stop using "and" for 3, 4, 5. I assume we'd want it, if we're going to use it in one place, we use it in all of them. Those are ors. The lawyers over here are having fun.
That's a good catch. It's because I added conditions 4 and 5 to this, and I didn't get to the ands, so I can make that
And it could be
change.
one "and" at the end that, but, so that's one point. But with respect to items 1 and 2, we are saying that it's minor if there's no increase of greater than those sizes. So you could cut the number of dwelling units in half and the floor area in half on an application, and we'd consider that minor.
Correct.
We'd consider it subject to plan.
Right, and I guess I just wonder whether, the most recent example we had, people were concerned that it was too big. But might there be times when people will be concerned that it's too, that they're meeting a certain minimum? I can't envision what it is, but it does strike me that if you're going to cut the size of a project in half, that doesn't really feel minor to me. And I wonder if maybe we should just say 5% increase or decrease. I guess I'd throw that out.
I thought we had earlier discussion about that, and that's what we kind of.
Oh, am I going back to what we asked you to change in the first place? Move the cannonballs to the other side of the yard now? If we did, I apologize.
And the reason that the code started that way is this was the recommendation from the city council, that if a project is getting smaller in size, the impact to the neighborhood is less, and that wouldn't necessarily require full review again. But I can sure change that if that's the desire of the Planning Commission.
Commissioner Forrest?
I guess the one time I could see that maybe being a concern is if there's a parcel that a building is proposed on the lot, and they decrease the size of it, but don't disclose, because they want to put something else on there as well, which would affect the use of the site overall. And I guess, it's a strange hypothetical, but I think that that just has to do with, well, what's the long-term plan for that property if it were dramatically reduced in size? But I think if it were dramatically reduced in size, that would be a red flag to the planner to use their discretion to say, you know what, this is a big change, and we want to bring it back. So,
Commissioner
Go
Platter?
back, but would you just add any proposed increase or decrease in the floor area? Then you're covered at that point.
In the language now, minor changes may be authorized by the planner. If a plan comes in where they're decreasing the size of the project in half, I would think I would bring that back. Something that's really a substantial change to the site plan, footprints of buildings changing, I would bring those back in that case.
Other comments? Commissioner Carpenter?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is just taking off of Commissioner Staunton's comments with respect to punctuation. On paragraph 1 after the word units, I'd put a semicolon. On paragraph 3, at the end of that paragraph, I'd put a semicolon and the word and. And in paragraph 4, at the end of that paragraph, I'd put a semicolon and the word and. And I think that would cover our concerns in that regard. And I'm done.
So then, if something does not comply with the city code requirement, it's not a minor change. If there is a change in building materials or color, it is not a minor change. And if the property is in the Edina Heritage Landmark District, it is not a minor change. So anything having to do with those three things, for sure would have to come back to the commission, right?
Basically, the only thing they can come and get approval from the planner is if they want to make it slightly smaller.
Right.
Which is really where this all started.
Which is really where we started. That's right.
So,
that's right.
It's a lot of work to get there, but now they're going to be okay asking for that one thing.
So, is there a motion? Would you care to make a motion about this?
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance as modified.
Is there a second? Second. Further discussion? Okay, the motion has been made and seconded to pass on to the City Council this recommended ordinance change with the punctuation changes as called forth by Commissioner Carpenter. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good. We will move that ordinance on to the City Council. And utility and mechanical equipment. Carrie?
Okay. Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. I've again revised this ordinance based on our discussion at the last meeting. This is placing the regulation on the utility and mechanical equipment. We've reduced the size that would require a setback down from 80 square feet to 36 square feet, and also added the condition that if these things are grouped together, that we require, if all of them in the aggregate exceed 36 square feet, they would be required to meet setback requirements. So with that, we can open it up for discussion.
Questions, discussion?
Sure.
Commissioner Carpenter.
When we talk about size, Carrie, we're talking about basically the footprint?
Yes. Yeah.
I wonder if maybe it would be useful to, I hate to be the wordsmith again, but to maybe modify that a little bit to reflect that that's what it is, because otherwise size in a generic sense, whoops, is kind of confusing.
Well, yeah, square feet square feet is a two-dimensional concept.
But, but that makes it clear that,
Commissioner Forrest.
I agree that to a certain extent, there could be some ambiguity, because if you say 36 square feet in size and 6 feet in height, it could refer to the face of it versus the footprint of it. So perhaps inserting, if the utility footprint is less than 36 square feet in size and so forth.
You're correct.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Staunton. We're starting to lose it.
Carrie, can you just remind me, I see this is subsection 850.07 subdivision 23. What leads into this? Because this describes various utility buildings and structures, but is this like everything that's okay or everything that's not okay, or what's the section say?
It is. It would apply to all districts. It's our general requirements. It would apply to all zoning districts.
So it's a general standards about various, so I assume there's 22 other subdivisions before this that talk about whatever, accessory structures or other things, and this is just the regulations with respect to utility buildings and structures?
Correct, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Other discussion while we're waiting for Commissioner Carpenter. Does he wordsmith? Commissioner Forrest, excuse me.
I was just thinking, if you had a wind generator of any size, even a smaller residential one, that could potentially fall into this too. So we're going to have to be aware of that if we end up getting, I mean, what I'm wondering is, how does that conflict? Currently, that's considered an accessory use in a property, and there's a 30-foot.
Those have their own separate regulations, so that wouldn't apply here.
They do currently?
They do.
Okay, we've added that into the.
That's always been in the code.
It's been there.
What?
We haven't done anything
Wind
with it.
generators have?
Yes.
Huh, I missed.
Is what is your preference? Is there a motion?
Got to be blunt with this crowd.
I would make a motion to approve this as noted to go to the council.
Been moved and seconded to move this on to the council. How about with a concern that we want to make sure that the 36 square feet, it refers to footprint?
Correct, yes, that's with Commissioner Carpenter's recommendation.
Okay. So is that okay for the second? Okay. Been moved and seconded to move this on to the city council with our recommendation. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Good, thank you. Was there a council connection in our packet? I didn't see one. Okay. That's right. Chair and commission member comments. Any comments from any of the members? Commissioner Staunton?
Just an update on the status of the Grandview small area planning process. We are making progress. There is a draft of a small area plan that the consulting team and the steering committee have put together that is available on the city's website as well as at www.edinacitizenengagement.org. And so you can look at that draft plan. The process that we're engaging in right now calls for us the steering committee to meet again on January 7th, which is a Saturday. We're going to meet, I think, from 8 to noon in the morning at the Senior Center to try to kind of revise that draft plan and get to a place where we can finalize it by mid-January or so. And then we will be coming before the Planning Commission. We're hoping in mid to late February for a public hearing on proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan that the small area plan would represent. So we're excited to be moving along and encourage people who might be watching tonight to watch those two websites and follow what we're doing. We are going to do some interesting work on the Edina Citizen Engagement website to allow people to comment via blog and take a look at that draft plan and make their comments. So I encourage people to take a look and tell us what they're thinking, and we're looking forward to getting public input and reaction and Planning Commission reaction to the work that we've been doing.
Also, those in the public who have Facebook pages, some of this material can be accessed. There's a Facebook page for Edina Patch and also for a site called Politics in Edina. So there's a lot of places where people can access information about this small area plan. Other comments by commission members? Okay, staff comments? Hearing none from that. Okay, I will, so if there's nothing else to come before the meeting, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Potts?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.